So, how does it feel when you play Roll Up to Win with Tim Hortons? Buy a hot or cold beverage using the Tim's app and find out. Roll in the app for a chance to win prizes ranging from free coffee and donuts to a Universal Orlando resort vacation or a sweet car. Oh, don't forget the TV. And this year, every roll is a shot at a $1,000 daily giveaway drawing for two $500 prizes. Roll up to win and get treated by Tim's. No purchase necessary. Account registration required. 50 U.S. and D.C. 18 plus entered by 4/2/23. See rules at rolluptowin.com for free entry or full details. Void in Florida and where prohibited.
We're recording this Progressive commercial on a real boat to let people know that when you bundle your home, boat, and other vehicles...
What was that, Flo?
Progressive saves you money, Jamie.
Why are we doing this on a boat?
We were going for authenticity.
We're going to the city?
Authenticity.
You mean Atlantic City? But we're not in the Atlantic. Are we?
Bundle your home and other vehicles with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations.
Gas rock 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna cook a meal that's gonna make you mine. I'm turning up the oven, now we're ready to roast. When you touch me, honey, you'll love it the most. Come on and put me in a loving shoe.
Welcome to another Britflicks.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is screenwriter Matthew Darby. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Good man, good man. We're going to talk a bit about your film Gone in the Night, directed by Eli Horowitz. We'll talk a little bit about how that collaboration worked. We're also going to delve into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life after we've done that, which I'm excited to do, given the choices. And we'll get to that when we do. But first off, do you want to give people a brief synopsis as to what Gone in the Night is all about?
Yeah, sure. So it starts with a couple, and they are on a weekend getaway. Their relationship is on the rocks, and they're trying to kind of salvage things. They get an Airbnb. They pull up to the Airbnb, and there's another couple already there. And so the story sort of unfolds from there, and it is a bit of a sort of puzzle box mystery, and it twists and turns from there. I don't want to spoil too much of what happens after that.
No, that's cool. That's a hell of a sell. So in writing that and working with Eli on it, what was the kernel of the idea that sort of led to the film that people can see today? Where does it start for you?
Yeah. So Eli and I've collaborated on a bunch of different projects over the years, and one project that he collaborated with another writer on was the podcast Homecoming, which came out in, I think, 2016. It was a really it kind of reinvigorated that the scripted audio format and got a lot of attention. Eventually, he became the showrunner for a TV version.
Amazing TV show. Amazing TV show.
Oh yeah. I think it's fantastic. And so this production company, Boulder Light Pictures, approached Eli somewhere, 2018, and they were like, "We love your stuff. We'd like to give you, this budget to make whatever you want."
Oh, wow.
And Boulder Light. So Eli was like, "Oh, that's a great offer." And so Boulder Light had historically, they're a horror production company. And so that sort of got Eli's mind into the space of like, well, what could we do in the horror space? Like, how could we make an interesting take on a horror theme? And so he hit me up because I'm the person he goes to whenever he's got like he wants to just blue sky something, because I'm always ready to dive in. And so he had there are these 2 concepts that he had. One was this idea of a double booking. He was renting an Airbnb at the time and had some strange experiences. And so that was sort of the initial kernel. And then we had also been talking about Peter Thiel, that sort of eccentric tech billionaire who was using, like paying 20-year-old men to give their blood to him so he could have these transfusions because he thought it was a sort of fountain of youth. And so the movie was just like, we had these two poles, like these two ideas, and we're like, how do we fit these together? And so the process of writing was like starting with this idea of this couple pulling up to this Airbnb and then ending with this kind of like vampire narrative, or like what is a 21st century vampire? Probably like a tech billionaire who, is like sucking the blood out of Generation Z. So and so in as we were sort of like trying to to like write toward the middle of these two poles, we sort of set it became this story about aging and the fear of aging, and so we had we have these characters that represent like the four generations of like Gen Z, Millennial, Gen X, and Boomers, and like how do they how do their desires interact and create the forward motion of the story. So it became sort of that's where we found the kind of like personal stakes in it as as two creative people in our 40s trying to deal with these questions of aging and permanence and mortality, and that's the kernel.
So once that begins to unfold in front of you, what then became the sort of main storytelling challenges in terms of executing that?
Well, it was really the timeline, and so we because it's a mystery that unfolds through the perspectives of those characters, and so we were moving forward in time and then stopping and going back and looking at the events through another character's perspective. And I think we sort of entered into it thinking that this was going to be this was going to give us all kinds of freedom to like breaking the linear timeline, but it actually became quite tricky because you have to deal with not only like making sure that the stories link together and that the tension is building throughout the story, but you have to there's this sort of audience attention that we were recognizing as we were writing the drafts, that like you had to keep like the audience can only hold so much memory in its sort of RAM, right? So we had to, if we were breaking the timeline and going back, we had to, develop these clear cues and markers in the storyline so that, so that an audience could understand that, like, oh, now it's 3 weeks earlier, and we are looking at it from the perspective of the the partner, the person who disappears. So it was very tricky and required a lot of like drafting scenes and rearranging them on the proverbial corkboard. I should also say that we live on opposite coasts of the state. So I'm on the East Coast and Eli's on the West Coast. And so we actually never met in person writing this, the whole story. But one advantage of this time lapse is that like I get up at 4:30 in the morning. That's when I do my writing. And so I would get up, draft a scene, send it to Eli. He would wake up, 3 hours later, read it. We'd get on the phone at noon my time, which is like right after he's woken up and given notes and feedback. And then I'd have the rest of the day to sort of iterate on that. So that we sort of like made the the time zones work in our favor, which was the
that's
it
interesting.
turned out to be a really
I-
efficient way to work.
Yeah, because I interviewed Lucas Dont, who's the Oscar nomination for the Belgian film Close this year, and he collaborates with a screenwriter, and what they do is they write the same scene each, and then compare. So they discuss what it's going to be, and then they go off and write it themselves. And he said he would write something with more or less the pattern was his would have no dialogue, and his screenwriters would be full of dialogue, and it was kind of like they'd marry the two.
That's
kind of
incredible. Oh, that's that sounds so fun too. To like as a creative exercise,
Absolutely.
right? To like write the same scene, and then how do you there must be like all these interesting ways you can interleave them.
Yeah, because it's that
really
thing
cool.
of like, because we know that ideas are 10 a penny, and if you the story of two people picking up finding a double book Airbnb can go infinite amount of ways, can't it?
Totally.
It's a great idea, but it can go infinite amount of ways.
Right.
So therefore, the idea of splitting the infinity on a scene, like what would you do, knowing full well what the execution's meant to be, or the purpose of the scene.
Yeah.
Well, look,
that's very cool. I want to use that.
You got to find someone to do the exercise with.
Yes, exactly.
Well, look, thank you for sharing that. It's always good to sort of get our heads around about how people's process works, because I think one of the things that I definitely think I've learned through trying to find my own process is that it is your own process that works. There is an app. I mean, you can try obviously what you've seen other people do, but ultimately the only one that's any good to you is the one you find that works. And the more people enter you, the more like literally that was a new one to me as well,
Yeah.
Well, look, let us jump into 3 films that impacted everything in your adult life. Now, before we do, I'm just going to speak to the listener who might have joined this podcast for the first time and isn't aware of the format. So you've given me 3 film titles that are part of the formative years of your life, part of like what made you maybe pay attention to the form, where you might have just been this thing that would entertain you. Then suddenly you're like, hold on a minute, what's this thing that people keep putting in front of me? Or even like the memories of who you watched it with, where you watched it, how you got to watch it, those kind of things. And what we'll do is, to make it fun, we're going to do it against the clock. So we'll have 5 minutes on each film. And then every 5 minutes, when we hear this sound, you hear that okay at your end, Matt?
Yep.
Good, man. So when it's DEFCON 1, that's when we move on to the next film.
Fantastic.
So, without further ado, I will prompt you with the title, and then the clock will start, and then we'll talk about. I'll listen to what it is for you, and we'll have a chat about it. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay. Starting the clock on 1980s, The Elephant Man.
Yes. Okay. So, I, growing up, I was sort of on the cusp of the era where VCRs were affordable for families. So this dates me. But before that, there was an appliance store in our town on our main street that rented this thing called a video disc player. And video disc was this dead media format that was actually a phonograph record. It predates Laserdisc. It was a phonograph record that had like super, some like insanely sensitive stylists that could read these. And they had like a cache of maybe like 50 films. And so it was a big deal. Like on my birthday, I got to rent this video disc player. And so for my 6th grade birthday, I selected the double feature of The Elephant Man in 2001, which is a real party, like real, a real party. And so, but these 2 films like completely, blew open my
Can I just take you back to the
creative consciousness?
Can I take you back to the 12-year-old picking those 2 films? Like, Had you gone for them, or was the allure of the covers what got you in when you were there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think I had heard about 2001, and I definitely, I was into science fiction. We'll get into that a little bit more later. So I think there was an allure to that film. And then The Elephant Man, I think it was a bit of an odd choice, but I had seen, I'd seen this clip from on television of John Merrick, the Elephant Man, like running through the sort of like this London underground, being chased by this mob, and he, it's when he shouts, "I'm not an animal, I'm a human being," and that it sort of terrified me, both because it was black and white, and it was this like disfigured human trying to like declare his humanity over this crowd. There's just something really disturbing about it. And so that just, and the fact that it was a black and white film that came out in 1980, all of those, it just had this weird allure. And so I watched it with my friends, and and so I think what struck me, I could talk about, I think it is such a tightly structured film, a classic. It's a classic 3-act structure. It's beautifully scripted, and you could set a clock to the sort of like moments of transformation in the script. And recently I did that. I looked at looked at the timeline of the film, and David Lynch is known for these like very bizarre.
Yeah, it's the least lynching, isn't it?
Films yeah, exactly. And so, but that film is evidence that he knew the language of film inherently, which enabled him to, mess with it in later films. And so, so I think, formally I was like, I was aware that I was in the presence of this like artistic creation, and that was, that sort of like, got my, caught my creative attention. But then it's also, it's like a deeply empathetic film. And I think it's, and it is about, at its core, it's about what it means to be human. And I think so as a sort of like growing, sort of like trying to understand like where I fit in the world, it really impacted me, as a human, as a moral being, and like, understanding this, this man who is like, disfigured beyond recognition, but who had this, human soul that was trying to get out. And, and it's also, this, there's the narrative of John Merrick, the Elephant Man. And then there's the narrative of, Treves, the doctor who, at first tries to like save him, and, ends up recognizing that he's participating in the freak show. All right. Wow.
That was 5 minutes, sir.
Wow. That is fast. That was faster than I thought. I didn't even get to cover what I needed to. I'm going to have to be sharper for the next one.
Well, do you want, is there anything...
I want to win this. I want to win this, Stuart.
Is there anything you want... Is there anything obvious you want to say that you want to add before we move on in regards to Elephant Man?
No, I think it would... I would, that would just take another 10 minutes. So.
Okay.
Watch the movie. Go see it. It is incredible.
It is.
Go see it in your living room.
Get it for your 12th birthday party for your kids.
Yes, exactly. It is a hit, a surefire hit.
Right then. This was a curveball for me, this next choice, not one I was familiar with. So 1982's The Atomic Cafe. Do you want to tell us what you're doing? I'm guessing renting this one?
Yeah, no, this was actually so I was obsessed with nuclear Armageddon as a child of the 80s. That it was we just faced every day with this existential uncertainty. And
Matt, 10-year-old me asked my mother if we were going to have the bomb dropped on us, and she said, "No, we're going to be all right."
Well, that's, that conversation is essentially, what's at the core of this movie. So, one of the other contenders for this that I was going to bring was the movie The Day After, which in America was the most watched event on television. My parents forbid me to watch it. And so I found in a dumpster this black and white TV and like secreted it up to my room to watch that. But so it was very difficult, to watch that. But this movie, The Atomic Cafe, was sort of like on all the time. It was one of those movies that they showed on cable, just like, I don't know, the licensing was cheap for it or something. But
I guess, because I guess for the audience who doesn't know it, it's a series of 1940s and 50s United States government information about the impending apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a documentary provisionally, and you're right. It uses like army training films, propaganda films, and then newsreel footage that documents the sort of advent of the atomic age. And one of the things that I didn't realize as a kid, but in terms of like my growing sort of like aesthetic sense, one of the things that this documentary is known for is that they did not have a narrator's voice in this whole movie. It is all composed exclusively of this archival footage. So you get this impression of this, like you watch this footage of this hydrogen bomb being detonated and this entire village being completely decimated, this sort of like model village. And then right after that, you see the duck and cover, propaganda film, which a lot of people may be familiar with, but it was, it shows these sort of like, cheerful school children sitting in class. And then there's a white flash and then they all jump under their desks. And, there's this reassuring narrator saying that like, all you have to do, just duck and cover and you'll be safe from an atomic blast. And so, the disparity, like the sort of, well, the junction of those two pieces of media, this like, archival footage of the actual effect of the blast, and then this like propaganda, this sort of fanciful propaganda about that experience is a way to like enforce government control. Like it was the first, it was like my first experience in like having insight into the fact that the systemic forces that that control our lives and that are working overtime to sort of like build this society that is all about destruction, behind the scenes.
I was just thinking, Matt, as you're saying it, can you imagine getting the brief in the 40s and 50s where somebody says, "Hey, Matt, can you do us a bunch of propaganda videos that basically say the atomic bomb isn't a threat to your safety? That's what we need."
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there, I think, a lot of Americans, just bought into that and felt secure. And there's, and so there's one moment in particular I wanted to try and get in before my 5 minutes are up, where another thing that I saw for the first time was there's this newsreel footage of Harry Truman right after they've dropped the bomb on Nagasaki. And what the documentary director did was to show you the footage before the newsreel started, where Harry Truman is like just talking shit with the film crew, and he's laughing, and then they're like, "Okay, start," and he immediately like his face falls, and he's like, "We have just dropped a bomb and ended the war," and that like there's recognition that the people in power are just. They are just fucking around. They're just people like us. It was sort of like sobering and terrifying and really eye-opening. So, yeah, that's the Atomic
no.
Cafe.
And it's fascinating now because you kept saying the phrase "duck and cover." How that's now a clothing brand.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Which is kind of mental when I think about it, if I think too hard about
Totally.
it. A phrase that would have would have horrified children growing up and parents in the 40s,
Right.
50s is now just casual wear for men.
Yeah. A brand. Yeah.
Right. Your final choice of your three films that have impacted everything in adult life is something that for me speaks to like the core of the VHS boom in my mind. This is VHS land if ever it was. 1985's Enemy Mine. Do you want to talk us through what this is in terms of your film life?
Yeah. So, my brothers and sisters were all like, we all grew up, we were weird kids. Like we didn't like sports. We were all like, just had our, heads in books all the time and were drawing on the floor. And my dad he didn't really know what to do with us. Like, I think he secretly wanted us to all be into football and so he was trying to connect with us. And the one point of connection was science fiction. He was a big sort of Star Trek fan. And so this was like the way he could connect with us. He didn't really do a lot otherwise. But so when I was, a kid, he saw this, in the paper, he opened up the paper. There's this big ad for this movie, Enemy Mine, which the poster for it has like Dennis Quaid facing off against this like fearsome looking reptilian, played by Louis Gossett Jr. And, you're like, oh, this is going to be an epic space battle. So we go to this movie and we're sitting in the theater and, it starts out that way. There's this sort of, this detachment, the International Space Force detachment going to like battle these aliens. Dennis Quaid crashes. He, comes into conflict with this alien that is, an enemy of the human race. Then 20 minutes later, these two men are in this relationship, and you find out that this alien, the Louis Gossett Jr. character, like that race can reproduce without a mate. And so he becomes pregnant and gives birth to this baby. And, Dennis Quaid is like the midwife for this birth. And so at the midpoint of this movie, you're watching this very like tender, like non-traditional family that is created out of these two people who are forced into these circumstances beyond their control. And so I was completely blown away. Like, it was not at all the movie that I went in expecting, and it was sort of the first time I saw this model, like this sort of like shattering of this weird like masculine trope that I had become comfortable with in watching science fiction movies. It was it was a very human story that was about this this family, and the Louis Gossett Jr. character dies, and then Dennis Quaid has to raise this kid on his own. And so you see him like trying to like become a father to this child on this weird alien world. And so rewatching it, I was like, okay, there, some aspects of this movie have not aged particularly well, but I'm still kind of blown away by the way that it told this very human story, using this, like big space opera palette. And those are the kinds of like, that's the kind of science fiction that I have always sort of like felt drawn to, like the sort of the silent running end of the spectrum where, it's about like, how do we live in the future? And this, and that was like, I hadn't really been exposed to anything like that before Enemy Mine. So it just, it blew up the possibilities of like, what a science fiction movie could be. And also like, what a family could be, and like what it means to be, like a man. And like, it doesn't, like, do I have to follow these, stereotypes that I'm being bombarded with in the rest of my life? So, So yeah, it was hugely impactful for those reasons, you know.
So that was kind of that was your sports game with your dad then, really. So that was
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know, and so there's that angle too, where like I'm sitting in this theater with my dad, who, you know, we didn't really he was a really quiet guy. Like we didn't really interact that much. I'm sure we did not said a word about the movie. Like we came out of the theater and got back into the family station wagon completely silent. Like we never talked about like what the movie meant, but it was, you know.
That's our 5 minutes. It dawned on me actually, because I hadn't thought about it till you brought up on the list, is that, and I saw this film long after I'd seen Enemy Mine, is you ever see the 68 movie Hell in the Pacific? Where you've got a marooned Japanese soldier and a marooned American soldier. And it's like it's basically an anti-war war film. So you get that kind of two people who basically want to fight each other at first, and then eventually, because they're marooned on an island, to survive, they have to.
Oh, that's I have to check that out.
It's a glorious really film with Lee Marvin.
Oh, amazing!
And with Lee Marvin being a very much a man's man of acting, it's it's sort of playing against the type of the kind of what it starts off with the macho, but the pair of them end up having to not be because survival is not about who wins a fight.
Right. Exactly. It's about this kind of interdependence and you know, very much like which you know, it's very much about relenting power in, you know, to uplift community, really.
Indeed. Well, look, thank you very much for sharing your 3 films. Thank you for sharing a bit of the process that went into Gone in the Night. And it just gives me to say thank you very much for joining us on the Britflicks podcast.
All right. Thank you, Stuart. This was awesome. Super fun.